Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I think we're going to get started here. I want to introduce you to Comport before we get too far into the session today. So today's agenda, we're going to do a Comport introduction sorry about that. Justin and Joe are going to be having a discussion on security and AI within security. Just a little bit of Comport. We have 40 years serving customers within New England. We're headquartered in Ramsey, New Jersey, and we started our corporate offices there. Since then, we've expanded out to New England, the Mid-Atlantic, and in 2018, we bought another company and expanded further into the Minneapolis area. Our expertise is in hybrid cloud, data center, networking security, and cloud. As well as you start to move into as a service, we are offering a lot more in that area. We have 3 different brands within Comport. Comport Technology Solutions, which is the traditional implementation arm of our services. So we do anything from data center to end user, and in this case, IT security. So that's implementing and understanding what your environment is and what you're looking for. Comport Secure is our cloud solutions and as a service branch. We work with customers to continually monitor their environment and make sure that their patching is done and their security is up to date so that they don't have issues with ransomware or other security breaches. We're also working with customers on backup as a service and DR as a service. So if there are any issues, you can get back up and running very quickly. Comport Healthcare Solutions is another branch of Comport, and we work with a lot of healthcare organizations and hospitals. Our former CTO used to work in a hospital, and we have a lot of expertise in this area. So these are just some of Comport solutions and services. We have different areas that we work with, and we have both account managers, project managers, and engineers in each one of these sections. Today, we're going to be talking about our security solutions. We have both proactive software solutions and managed security solutions. So today's speakers, Justin is our field CTO for security. He creates strategies for our customers and works with them to understand their current environment, where they're trying to get to, and any gaps that they have open at the moment within their security. Joe is from Abnormal. He has over 20 years experience in the security industry. He is experienced in messaging, networking, and physical borders. And as he's moved into the Abnormal realm, he's getting more familiar with how you can utilize AI and machine learning to help secure your environment. And with that, I'm going to send it over to Joe. He's going to do a quick presentation for you, and then they're going to have a live discussion. So Joe, looks like you're self-muted. You're going to have to take yourself off mute.
Joe might be having some technical difficulties here.
Joe, if you're having difficulties, you can put a message in the chat to us. You just have to press the mute button, and you should be able to unmute yourself. You're an organizer and presenter, so I cannot do it for you. Justin, in the meantime, do you want to talk a little bit about Comport Security Services and our partnership with Abnormal?
Here we
Sure,
go.
I'll add a little bit while we're waiting for Joe to get on, and maybe Eric Crucker, if you're on, we can talk a little bit while we're waiting for Joe.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
so today's call, like Lori was mentioning, the goal is to talk about how to improve your email security posture above and beyond what Office 365 can do. Is that Joe sharing the screen? Is he coming alive with us?
Yeah,
I believe so.
yes, sir.
Awesome. Thanks for joining. So I'll just do my intro quick, and then I'll ask you a question, Joe, right out of the gate here, and you can kind of do an intro for yourself too. So, like Lori's mentioned, I'm Justin Younglitz, the CTO at Comport. Been with the organization for about a year and a half, working a lot around the network modernization of security for a number of our clients. And today we're going to be talking about Office 365 integrations with Abnormal. So the first easy question I have for Joe, and he can introduce himself, is how long has Abnormal Security been around? Because they're not your typical big upper right-hand corner magic quadrant security company that's been around for 20 years. And why did Abnormal Security get started in the email space?
Absolutely. Are you guys all able to hear me now?
We can see your screen in non-presentation mode, and we can hear you great.
Lovely. Okay. So that being said, just to kind of answer the question real quick, we've been a company for around 5 years now. Abnormal came into the market specifically to address a need that was very obvious from the kind of get-go when our co-founders went and surveyed several hundred CISOs in the space to say what is the biggest problem that you're having. And because this was a kind of 5 years ago type of situation, it was a very obvious answer, right? That they're going to say, hey, the biggest issue we're having is gaps in email security that are allowing attackers to form very good high-end attacks and to get them past our existing gateway services. So that's where our co-founders, Evan and Sanjay, who really come from more of a pure machine learning and artificial intelligence space. They come from Twitter and Google and Amazon, building these next generation AI and ML based companies, and to then leverage that type of technology to start to understand things like known good communication patterns within organizations. So Abnormal has been founded on the concept that there is this big gap by people who have a proven track record of the ability to understand behavior real time, and have delivered this product for about 4 years. There's been product on the market. In that time, we've been able to capture over 12% of the Fortune 500. So definitely, a software that's being used not only by the kind of mid-market kind of folks, but all the way up the chain to the largest companies in the world.
Awesome. So as you guys have been around for 5 years, the email landscape, phishing attacks, all those kind of things are very prevalent. Every customer on here has probably seen one themselves. Hopefully didn't click on those links. Ransomware is out there. Email is one of those big vulnerabilities. As we look at the traditional landscape of maybe how Office 365, Microsoft does email security, and other legacy platforms out there, they'll use what I'll call non-traditional techniques when talking to someone like Abnormal, because they're not using maybe AI and those kind of things. So what do you guys do that's a traditional method of email security in your environment, where you're not using AI, you're not using machine learning to help improve security posture?
Sure. So all of the output is in most cases from machine learning. But what we do is we build some concept of a kind of known condition within our vendor-based ecosystem, right? We have the ability to build our own kind of libraries of threat intelligence, which is more similar to what we see the kind of gateways do when we talk about things like who are your vendors, what are their normal kind of patterns, their bank accounts, their cities that they operate from. We're also going to take a look at all of the traditional email security kind of notches, right? We're going to look at all of the links and understand what this link is doing. We're going to look at all the attachments and have a real good idea of what this attachment might do if executed within our organization. So I think you'll see all the way from kind of super advanced attacks. We're always going to kind of take our initial cues from and then build upon with our AI modeling, but all the way down to things like your spam and gray mail, right? We're going to look at those types of inbound messages just like a seg would, albeit we're going to use your behavior and how you interact with those messages to make our decisions. But we are kind of covering that full gambit of attack surfaces that a seg would cover.
Gotcha. So what does the AI really do? So like I've been at a number of conferences this year, and AI and machine learning is all the rage right now, and that should be yours as well. What differentiates yourself from that traditional legacy organization where they might have massive databases of IP addresses and bad email addresses and all these things that they're using to kind of easily remove phishing attempts and those kind of things, to what is your AI doing that makes you unique compared to what you see out in the industry? And a lot of what I'm talking about when we want to compare is how we compare against Microsoft, right? Because a number of customers are like, oh, I have Office 365, I have Microsoft Defender for email. That should be good enough, right? So when we compare those legacy platforms, how do you guys differentiate yourself?
Absolutely, and I think one of the common themes that you'll see throughout, a proof of value with Abnormal is that we're not going to try to reinvent the wheel in cases where Microsoft can do something, right? So a lot of our organizations, they're paying for things like link rewriting or attachment sandboxing or bulk spam or whatever it is that they're paying for within their Microsoft suite that has a really good chance of being a quality product. You'll see us not recreate those things, right? But instead leverage those existing licenses that you guys have, and then layer in something like Abnormal that can fill those gaps. And the way that we do that is by leveraging this industry best artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I do like to kind of point this out that the majority of organizations that are kind of having these conversations about machine learning and artificial intelligence, it's not their bread and butter business, right? This is something they've brought on. Maybe it's an acquisition. Maybe they've just hired some people, but they're traditional organizations with traditional connections like in a seg that sits at the MX layer, as opposed to someone like Abnormal who's born in the cloud, right? We were never created to service email via an MX route. We were never created to service email with an on-prem environment. We're created in the cloud to service cloud workloads. And with that comes the massive experience of our co-founders whose only job was artificial intelligence and machine learning, right? They weren't doing other cybersecurity type of things. So I think that the levels of efficacy that we see from our machine learning platform is so far beyond what we see in the marketplace, because we started from a place of expertise within this field, right? That allowed the co-founders to look at this much more from a data science perspective, as opposed to a kind of security blocking and tackling perspective, to come up with the kind of 3 pillars of content analysis that we use to identify these types of anomalous behaviors. And you mentioned something very specific and relevant, that Microsoft or Proofpoint or Mimecast, any of these traditional vendors, they're going to be operating under this concept of known bad, right? They've got lists of bad domains and bad attachments and bad links. They've got MD5 hashes of things they believe to be bad. But I think if we take a real solid look at all the attacks that have come at our organization over the last year or month or whatever we want to use, I think we'll find that the majority of those simply don't contain IOCs that can be grabbed in that way, right? A lot of these attacks are coming from Gmail or other free mail services in the world. They're coming from our legitimate vendors, or simply taking over accounts that have no bad associated with their domain. The links are being hidden behind things like Cloudflare instances and other obfuscation techniques like QR codes that pretty much renders our concept of looking at known bad or lists of known IOCs fairly useless for the majority of directed attacks that we see. So what you'll see Abnormal really kind of shy away from is that concept of known bad, and looking at lists of people that aren't allowed in, and really then focus instead on what normal known good behavior looks like across these three pillars. So you'll see us dynamically build real-time models around everyone in the organization around identity, right? What email address do they use? What's the tone and temperament of their messaging? Are they on an iPhone or an Android? What's that device ID? Where are they logging in from in the world? Do they use a VPN, right? That identity graph extends to your vendors and your customers, right? What domains does this vendor normally come at me from? What invoicing service do they use? What types of language might they include? What banking details does this vendor normally use? We then move into behavioral insights. We're able to truly use our natural language processing to understand what the context of an email is, right? What is this relationship? Is this between an accounts payable person at a vendor and my controller? Is this a conversation between a customer and someone who's in support? All of these build our internal communication graphs to understand both what our communication should look like with people in the outside world, as well as what our communication should look like with our internal stakeholders, the other people within our organizations. And then we do a very thorough understanding of the content within that pillar, understanding links and attachments. Do these links and attachments make sense for this vendor or this user for this conversation in this context, right? On top of your traditional, what is this link? What is this attachment? We dive very heavily into financial invoicing and analyzing what a normal known good invoice should look like. And then we do a full natural language processing stack or fingerprint against every user. Does this word make sense? Does this pattern of language align with what this user normally uses? So we see a massive amount of data like this because of the way we're plugged in. Being plugged into that graph API plug, looking at 40, 50, 60,000 signals per message, using all of them in real time to build out these three pillars and understand when we should block a message after it's gotten through the gateway, after it's gotten past Microsoft, but before it actually hits our end user is a unique and very helpful methodology to look at this stuff.
Gotcha. So to kind of re-summarize that and maybe some examples, let's say, Joe, you and I send emails on a weekly or daily basis, right? And I'm sending emails to abnormalsecurity.com, you're sending emails to thecomport.com, and that's just between you and me. And then I have my boss, Eric, who, let's say he doesn't ever send emails to you on a regular basis. Are you able to differentiate those differences between the domain names, the organizations, and the individual users inside each one of those organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. That relationship is built individual to individual as opposed to kind of company to company or individual to company. You do get that level of granularity to understand, hey, I communicate with multiple people in this organization. This is the topic, tone, and temperament of this particular communication versus when we communicate with this person. This is the type of attachment, or maybe they always send a link to a SharePoint, file or a OneDrive, and now they're sending a Google, link. That's a one tick or 1 point that we would look at over the 40 or 50,000 signals that we would consider about a message.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So then, jump in there, Eric?
Yeah, I'll jump in and just say that from what we're seeing from all of our customers is that the pace of attacks over the last 6 months or so, or year, has really picked up in intensity, right? So I talk to a lot of customers who just say it's really, really difficult to keep up with the bad actors, and they're using bots and all sorts of technology to their benefit to try to get these emails through. And I'll give you just a quick example, a personal example from our organization, and you can kind of talk through how this would have helped, right? So we were getting emails from an organization that looked like it was legitimate, but they had put like a dash in the middle of the email address. Like, so it said organization-organization.com, right? And then it was sent to our accounts payable team, and it looked like a legitimate request. Like, hey guys, we've changed our banking. We're now banking with XYZ organization. Can you resend your last payment that you sent to us? and our folks really had a difficult time dealing with those sort of things. Like, this looks legitimate, and the pace of work and the pace of emails that are coming in just in general makes it extremely difficult for our folks to pick out little nuances in those emails that make them really look and stand out and look legitimate. And people are the bad actors putting a lot of work into these emails. So in that situation, like, how are you guys helping with those things and stopping accounts payable from, sending a $100,000 payment to a vendor or, to a fake vendor of ours?
Yeah, absolutely. 100,000 would be a great number to deal with. We called out an instance similar to what you're describing, where we stopped a $36 million fraudulent release of dollars from an escrow account for a massive real estate deal about 6 weeks ago or 2 months ago. So we have a real good track record of those types of things. I think that the best way to think about this is to look at an example of an attack like this. And all these attacks that I talk about, these are all anonymized, legitimate attacks, right? So when we look at this, we'll see that these often start out with legitimate communication. The hire an A just wanted to confirm, received your payment. That's legitimate. Us talking to our vendor, we respond, thanks for confirming, have a great day. What our attackers are doing in a lot of cases are they're either, like in this case, compromising a legitimate account within our vendor, or in a lot of cases, they're grabbing this snippet of email in the clear on a wireless network or somewhere. And then what they'll do is they'll come across the top of an existing conversation. Hi, Renee, update, we're moving to a new bank and requesting a change of payment information. We tend to see these swell fairly badly anytime there's reports of a bank having issues in the news. We'll see thousands of these claiming that they bank with XYZ Bank and make sure not to pay them. But when we see a message like this, it's really easy to understand why our traditional security tools like a Microsoft or a Proofpoint or a Mimecast wouldn't be able to grab something like this, right? We're looking at something that doesn't have any bad links or bad attachments. In this instance, it's coming from the legitimate domain of the vendor. But in the instance that it was coming from a brand new registered domain that an attacker was using to impersonate your vendor, that would still leave us, very little to go on from a threat intelligence point of view. Now, the real delta with how we grab these, and I've seen everything from a $300,000 invoice. I stopped a $3.45 million. We talked about the $36 million. All of those come back to our ability to identify and build models around the patterns of communication within your vendors. So all of this is coming from what we call vendor base. And if we look at some of the kind of quick data that it's pumping to the top for us, we looked at more than 1,341 emails from this vendor. And even though it's coming from one of their legitimate accounts, which would normally give us no kind of pause, we'll see that this message is actually the first one we've ever seen from their domain that's originated in the Netherlands. So an odd login for the third party. All this data is available via Graph and Microsoft. We're also able to call out behavior analysis to say that, hey, this vendor is known to us. We've never seen them alter the reply to address in their header to move communication to this Pro1 LIA typo squatted domain. So we're constantly looking for new domains, whether it's in the sender, a reply to, in a link in the body of the message, and comparing off the domains that we see in real time to that list of known good domains associated with this particular vendor. So all of this data is coming right off the back of what we call vendor base. Vendor base is a very significant differentiator for Abnormal to solve exactly the problem that you brought up, sir, that if we can show you in real time, and we'll walk through what the integration to get this done looks like, a list of every vendor that you have, what domains they use, who the contacts are on both sides of the conversation, what country and IP address they traditionally do business from, and then anonymously federate that data throughout the entire Abnormal community. That means we can use the millions of mailboxes that we service in countries all over the world to risk score every vendor that you have in real time. This is the missing piece for a lot of these detections that we see that really leave our accounts payable people scratching their head either before we lose a bunch of money, hopefully not after we lose a bunch of money.
So you'll look at all these things and score it based upon not only the IP address, but the domain, but also the language that's used inside of the email. So if they had just sent an email and said, hey, wanted to say thank you, for the payment, like that sort of doesn't tick up as putting this high on the on the list of being a vulnerability or being a potential attack. So the fact that they were talking about banks and talking about things like that inside of the email really upped the score. In other words, is that correct?
It's the language around things like financial transactions. We're going to pretty much ignore the pleasantries for sure.
Okay.
Great question. Any further kind of questions or any kind of way I can dive a little bit deeper into that question for anyone?
And that question can be open for anyone that's attending the webinar. You can either put a question in the question queue, or you can just open up a chat as well. So while we're waiting for that, potentially that vendor scoring of third parties. So when we look at a number of breaches, they're all from a quote unquote trusted vendor at some point, right? But that trusted vendor had an issue internally that created a breach internally that then exposed another company, right? So all of that data that you're collecting, is that something that you're leveraging all of your customers, the entire ecosystem of that normal security, or is it unique just to the relationships that I have, or a combination of both?
It is exactly that. It's a combination of both. Everyone has their own model set around how they interact with any particular vendor. We also then take that data anonymously, tokenize it, and use that upstream to make better global decisions about all these vendors.
So this is a live demo you have open here, right?
This is a what, sir?
Is this a live demo that you have open? This is your tool?
Absolutely.
Yep. So let's talk about another one of my questions I had was gray mail and like employee productivity. That's something that we don't really see from email security vendors per se, but how do we what options do we have to take care of email that's not for business use, right? So the example of like Kohl's Cash, right? I'm getting coupons from whatever vendor out there, and I'm using my company email for those addresses. What do you have to help mitigate those or isolate those so that our employees can stay focused on the task at hand, which is our job, and not looking at discounts for clothing, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's one of the things that, email security vendors have kind of almost kind of passed on that for a lot of this, because it's very difficult to identify, who should get what. And the reason is that the real kind of definition behind gray mail is exactly as you described, right? The Kohl's Cash or the LL Bean catalog or the Eventbrite notification, right? It's something that I very much may want to receive, but Justin absolutely does not want to see this moving forward. So it's very difficult to use a kind of security-based solution for a productivity-based problem, right? We tend to have a much larger hammer than you need, because the idea is you're either going to block this, domain for everybody, or you're going to allow it for everybody, and that leaves everybody kind of, not super excited. So what we're going to do here is a very simple kind of little trick, and it's that everything that we identify as gray mail is going to be processed by our productivity service. So what we're showing you here is the kind of the overarching, what are we seeing? Well, we're seeing this many kind of gray mail messages across, let's say, a 30-day span. We're hoping we can save about 822 hours for our users, and then a significant amount of time for our admins. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But really what we're doing here is we're looking at how many messages are received, giving it a value for ones that are open versus just kind of glanced at, and coming up with an amount of time that we believe that we can save the organization by the way that we manage gray mail. Now, although the UI shows you some interesting statistics about kind of trends in gray mail and kind of who are our most targeted people and senders for these things, the real magic happens right within the Outlook client. So if we just take our friend Braden here as an example, he received 1,452 gray mail messages in the last 30 days. That is massive. If you talk to Braden, if this was a real person, and said, hey, have you received that email that I sent you? They would almost certainly say no. I haven't had the chance to really wade through everything that's in my inbox to find those messages that are truly relevant to my work. We see that VIPs, they traditionally get 3 to 5 times the amount of this messaging. that I would. It's just a user. So that being said, when we look at this massive log of gray mail messages, the way that we're going to decide what goes where is we're going to look right into that end user's experience, right? So if we see this end user never opens this particular message, they never read it, they might delete it, they might throw it in the junk mail folder from time to time, the system will simply learn that this is the type of message that this user wants to see. Now, on the opposite side, if an end user were to go into this, let's say our promotions folder where we're going to leave, lots of our stuff that we believe to be unwanted gray mail, and say, oh no, we're considering recorded future. I definitely want to receive messages from them. They simply drag that to their inbox, right? So all of the normal functionality that they already do, deleting a message, dragging a message to junk, dragging a message out of junk, dragging a message out of promotions, these are all going to train this model in real time about what this particular user wants to see. So the way that this kind of manifests itself is, we have done this several times in kind of first weeks of production, is to jump on with the CEO or the CTO or the CISO, whoever it is that's getting absolutely slammed with this stuff, and just go through the inbox and say, do you want to receive this from Oncast anymore? Nope, we're not doing business with them anymore. Cool, junk. How about the Onion? Do you want that? Nope, junk. Do that for 2 or 3 days, and you will be absolutely baffled at how quickly this inbox goes from one that is cluttered and makes it difficult to get to the data that matters to one that is very bespoke, tailored for this particular user, and gives them only the data that they want to see. Really interesting kind of way to do this. As we know, our end users pull stuff in and out of folders all day, right? They have no problem with that. They don't like administrative controls. They don't like to go out to this portal through this, this email, block and deliver and whitelist that they don't understand. They have a separate password for some of these things. This is just their normal activity. And it's important to know when we bring on a customer with abnormal, we manage all those comms for you. So for something like this that might be actual interaction with an end user, we would have pre-written kind of communications to send out to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. end users, this is how this new feature functionality works, and we work with you to kind of make it your own and get it sent out on your behalf.
Yeah, so that's probably got to be the easiest end user training for email cleanup out there, right? Is just do what you want to do with it, and then we'll train the model to understand what it is that you really want from a result, and we'll start doing it for you, right? I can look at I can go in my rules in Microsoft Office 365 and look at all the rules I have to, punt emails different directions. So it's organized for how I, manage my email. That it could start to do those things for me by just dragging and dropping emails from time to time. So that's pretty slick. Are there other things, talking out loud, like does it look at like maybe how long an email's been read for and use that kind of information too? So if I see an email that's 5 pages long and I spend 2 seconds on it, can it learn that and go, oh, they don't really have a good relationship with that person, never looks at that email, so look at those kind of fingerprints as well? Yeah,
it's going to look at what you're interested in, and that's a really good example of a piece of data that would pull for sure.
Neat. So while we're kind of in this demo, another kind of example that I wanted to understand is nothing's perfect, right? So I'm going to presume that you can assume that you're not 100% with everything. So let's pretend that a phishing email did sneak through, and our organization, we use a lot of training to make sure that our employees understand what phishing emails are and why they exist, so that when something does slip through the cracks, they can kind of use their spidey sense. This doesn't feel right to me. What does an end user do with your tool to help train that model for future attacks?
Absolutely, that's a great piece, right? And that it's that, no one's 100%. We're going to be, in the 99.98 or whatever that's going to be, but we want to learn from our mistakes in real time, right? And that's kind of a tenet of the system. And how that works is we leverage what we call abuse mailbox. And so what abuse mailbox does is it leverages whatever your existing reporting pattern is today. And this kind of goes back to the training end users or not having to retrain users. And what abuse mailbox is going to do is monitor any locations that end users report messages to. So if your end user today has the option to maybe click a button in their Outlook client to report a message as suspicious, and or maybe to forward a message to, phishing@yourdomain.com, we're going to monitor both of those inboxes. So the second that an end user clicks a button, we're actually going to take a second look at this message. So in this instance, we'll see that we've got a message that was delivered. This message was reported by one of our end users. We took a second look at it and judged it to be malicious, creating a full in real-time detection and abnormal. And at the same time that we create that detection, we're going to remove that message, not only from the user that reported it, but from every other inbox that it hit in the organization. In the same breath, we're going to respond back to that end user saying, thank you, Mr. and Mrs. End User, for reporting this message. We believe this to be safe or malicious or spam or whatever we believe that message to be. This retrains the models in real time. This automates the SOC response process, so we're not out there writing PowerShell scripts or trying to individually remove messages from inboxes. This also drops the dwell time of reported messages. If a user reports it, it traditionally takes a SOC several hours to get the message, review the message, do the investigation, decide to remove it, get that message removed. This all happens, in breaths and button clicks. So we really only ever see one user in a campaign able to report a message. In production, it would remove every other copy. And then what's really nice about this is it's pre-trained to ignore your security awareness training, right? So your know-befores, your wombats, your that type of thing, those are not going to get caught up in this type of system. They're going to allow delivery to the end user for that traditional kind of, hey, they clicked on it or they replied to it or whatever it is, that to continue. And those will just end up in our not analyzed tab over here. So we always like to say that this kind of drops into the white space of the SOC. We don't need to retrain the end users. We don't need to make adjustments to our security awareness training. It's just going to automate any and all of the manual processes that we might have to do today.
Got it. So I think the big key there is, so let's say that email is sent to the entire finance department. There's 5 people, 10 people in there. One person, just takes one person to have enough knowledge to go, there's something goofy about this email. I don't like it. Whatever the reasons are. And rather than send it to the SOC or to the admin to go, oh, let me look at this, I'm going to have lunch first and I'm going to look at it. Oh, yep, that does look pretty nasty. I'm going to pull it back. 4 hours has gone by. Meanwhile, the other 9 people in the department probably clicked on the link already, right? So this is all automated, so it can retroactively say, hey, I saw this email go to 10 mailboxes. One person notified it as fraud or whatever the case may be. I'm going to pluck that email from those mailboxes, those other 9 mailboxes in real time, reanalyze it, verify that it's safe. If it's not safe, keep it pulled. If it is safe, potentially resend it. Is that kind of what I heard?
Yeah, absolutely. And where our traditional inbound email security scan is about 50 milliseconds, the secondary scan that we initiate when an end user reports a message, that's like a whole second. So it's a significantly more intense, laborious kind of scan for real-time models like ours, but allows us to dig all the way in. And if we do believe that to be malicious, like you said, it's gone for everyone, right? And then what we see the SOC able to do is, rather than work in a flat inbox where they then have to go out and write scripts or use other tools to remove messages, now they can work in this fully context-aware pattern, right? It says, hey, what was malicious today? Let's review. Let's make sure we agree with everything. Or hey, what that was reported today, did abnormal think was safe social engineering type messages? And let's review those. So understanding that the stuff's already been actioned, we're able to take the time to ingest this data, see if any changes in any other part of the security stack would be necessary. But at the end of the day, understanding that it is already been actioned as far as the SOC response, and B, that abnormal has already kicked off our own internal retraining of our models to understand this attack.
Yeah, I locked on to one thing you said there, which I find super ironic, which was we do a deep level scan and it takes an entire second to operate that scan. That's our longer one. We're all used to the old days of doing antivirus scans where it takes 18 hours to scan a hard disk, right? So it's super entertaining to hear how fast we can get all this done at. While we're in the demo, what other things do you find customers kind of find fascinating with what makes you guys so much different than the other people out there, or Leading to one of my other questions here, we've kind of hinted at it, but haven't really talked about directly, is kind of the better together story with Microsoft, right? So when we do these deployments, we're not removing Microsoft from the chain. We still want Microsoft involved, but what are you doing above and beyond what Microsoft does? And we'll take that other question I just had in a little bit as well.
Absolutely. So let's talk about some specifics, right, when it comes to the types of attacks that we're seeing, right? So when we're in our threat log here and we're looking at these various types of attacks, one that sticks out significantly to pretty much all the organizations that we see is the kind of straight social engineering attack, right? Sometimes these are VIP impersonations, sometimes these are vendor impersonations, but really what these all kind of boil down to is that when we look at an attack that's an abnormal only grab, right? Something that we definitely didn't grab at the gateway, we definitely didn't grab with a Microsoft tool. This is a good example of something. So as we look at this, we're looking at a VIP impersonation of our CFO. We'll see that this is inbound to one of our accountants. And we'll also see that this is a very simple message, right? It just says, Josh, you assist in getting 2 checks out today to our vendor. He's not available at the moment, but you got to handle this before noon, right? When we look at this message, it's pretty obvious that the ask here is for the 2 checks, but to the models, these are the same types of attacks as if they were asking for gift cards to be purchased. They were looking for their direct deposit information to be changed, all the way up to those quick favor requests, right? That, hey, this is your XYZ boss manager's manager. What's your phone number? I need to ask you a question or a favor. And all the way across to something like a vendor reaching in to say that they need to update their direct deposit information. All of these are going to fall into this kind of no links and no attachments, right? Our good attackers are going to make sure that SPF, DKIM, DMARC all pass for this message. So this type of message, whether it ends up being this or a Best Buy renewal that comes through as an image or a Geek Squad or a PayPal, any of these things are going to come down to the lack of threat intelligence on the Microsoft and the gateway side, and the ability for us to look at the real-time models that we've built around people like the sending user to understand from massive amounts of data. Look at how many emails this person sent that we've been able to kind of garner this information from, understanding with the real-time modeling that you would not receive a payment request as a first ever email from this Gmail address to a person that they've never spoken to before, with financial request included in the language and urgent sentiment delivered into this message. So this entire category of attacks that goes from slightly annoying to, wow, we really need to get controls in place for this, they all kind of evaporate day one with the abnormal solution. And from a security and an optics perspective, this is very well received from the organizations that we do business with, to be able to get rid of this whole classification of kind of social engineering, VIP impersonation, and the like. Another attack type that I think is really relevant to organizations, and they've been lacking in controls for this for some time, is the internal east-west style attack, right? In this instance, we're seeing a lot of cases where if one of our internal accounts is compromised, the attacker is going to sit in that mailbox. They're going to go through the contents of Renee's mailbox, and then they're going to form a almost perfect message to somebody like Zach and Josh asking for something like a wire transfer. Now, the problem with these attacks is because the threat actor has been in our user's mailbox, they can craft an email that looks exactly like every other email that Josh has received from Renee. In certain cases, we even see them, like this anonymized example, going through and finding the correct documents to fill out, like cash transfer requests, or including visually perfect invoices with this ask. And because this is an east-west message, because it's coming from one of our internal accounts to one of our other internal accounts, we can be sure that any gateway technology is never going to see this, and that Microsoft is going to all but ignore it. Now, when we look at a message like this, it's very easy for us to take in 43,000+ signals about this message to understand things like our friend Renee West eating lunch in San Francisco, but sending this message from Hong Kong an hour and a half later. Having never been to Hong Kong via VPN termination or actual travel before, this becomes a very, very unlikely message to be originating from the legitimate Renee. Because we're plugged in directly to the O365 tenant via Graph or in G Suite, we can see things like mail filter rules being created, right? Attackers love to create mail filter rules to hide their actual presence within our organization. Vendor base that we kind of discussed in detail is going to come in to tell us, hey, listen, we've paid a whole bunch of vendors via invoice, and that's fine, but this vendor doesn't exist. This vendor's a ghost vendor. We have no existing relationship between your organization or any other organization in this vendor. So really interesting to see us be able to not only action an east-west internal message like this, 10:18 p.m., Microsoft wants to deliver this mailbox to mailbox, 10:18 p.m., we evaporate this message before it makes it to the user, but understanding that that's only half the problem, right? We also understand that this is coming from a compromised account. So when we look at our advanced compromised account piece, you can see that we're bringing in data and pushing data out to most parts of your organization right now, which means that we'll start with things like sign-in events native from Microsoft. Hey, we see an Edge browser from an IP address we know from the Bay Area. This is good, this is fine. But it then seems very odd to correlate an Okta login from Hong Kong that's being given to us via a browser we've never seen before. We're able to include things like activities of what we would include as a non-owner. If we see delegated mailbox access being given, if we see a message being sent by someone that we don't believe to be the owner of the account, up to and including messages sent with links through things like Slack and Teams, even indicators from Zoom. All of this allows us to, in real time, say, hey, we believe this to be a fraudulent message. So let's go ahead and lock that account out. Let's notify Splunk to kick off an XOR playbook. Let's notify CrowdStrike to go through and kick off an endpoint scan. So I think that those two big kind of feature sets, the ability to not only identify east-west based messages that we believe to be bad, but use that telemetry in real time to lock out accounts and kick off playbooks all over our organization related to the compromised account is a significant increase in posture for the organizations that we talk to.
Cool. There's a lot of points there. I want to hit one of the questions that we got, and then I'll probably ask a slightly different, more open-ended question to that. So, how are the threat logs managed by the customer, and are the thresholds for alerting? So, I think what Michael's getting at is really what's the day in the life of an admin to manage this tool, right? So, we're talking about AI and machine learning, all these things. When does on the customer end, if I'm the email security guru at my organization, how often am I logging in this tool? What's that day in the life of babysitting this thing? What does it take to keep it alive? And how often am I looking at it? Those kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So I will say without a doubt that this is the only product that I've ever bought or represented that is absolutely going to give you time back. Traditionally, when we bring on new technologies, the question is how many heads, right? How many full-time employees am I going to need to manage this? So at the end of the day, we are absolutely going to give less time to email in general because we will be blocking 99-point-something% of the types of messages that are taking up your time right now, that you're running around doing cleanups of, responding to end user reports of, trying to figure out if they clicked the link, if they downloaded the attachment. The vast majority of those messages will evaporate. As far as how much time someone spends in the portal, what I'll say is that during the read-only POV that we do with absolutely every organization that's interested in abnormal, the vast majority of your time in the portal will be during that. And what I mean by that is during that POV, it's up to us as a team, myself and you guys, to review what's being hit in the portal. If we believe something to be a false positive, it's as easy as logging into the portal, selecting that attack, and submitting it to our data science team as a false positive. This means that we are able to show you in real time, not only if we agree with you or not that it is a false positive, but what we're going to change in the models based on your report. So the way we get to not having to be in this portal is any false positive or any false negative gets submitted to abnormal. We do not respond and ask you to do anything. We don't respond and ask you to write a rule or a policy. What we do is we look at the attack. We look at it, and by we, I mean our data science team, looks at this attack in a methodology that looks a little bit like this. We're able to look at what primary and secondary models were triggered for this particular miss. What do these look like with our other customers? How do we tune this intensity for you? What model stacks can we edit, swap, or otherwise change to understand your type of communication pattern? So really, the only thing that we need to do is during the POV is to drop any false positives or false negatives that we find on abnormal. That will give us 30 days of read only to really tune these models to get to that 1 in 1.1 million false positive rate, so that when you're an admin, I would say week 1 that this is in production, you would probably log in here every day. You would probably be, you would be motivated to do so just to kind of see what's going on, check on abnormal. By week 3, you might log in twice a week. At the end of the first, month or 2 of having this in production, it's likely that you would only log in here if you're being told that there's a problem, or running this completely headless by integrating with other parts of your organization, whether that's your SIM/SOAR platform, your ticketing systems, anything that can speak REST API, we can integrate with. So many of our customers run this almost completely headless from an Abnormal's UI point of view.
You hit on a number of things, and we're coming close to the top of the hour, so I'm gonna go right into them. So POV, and what's the deployment model for your tool? So with the assumption that I'm an existing Office 365 customer, maybe I'm using another email security product today. Let's talk about all the MX records I need to change, and what are the steps to do the install. You kind of touched on the POV a little bit on what those steps are, but let's talk a little bit about what kind of day 0 is, day 1 is, week 1 is, and during that POV, and talk about that deployment process.
Absolutely. I think deployment for the proof of value and deployment to go into full production are hilariously easy, right? We're an enterprise application that's in the O365 tenant that gives us the freedom to be very, very transparent about the way that we do this. So when it comes to a read-only POV, you say, hey, we see these types of issues, would love to see what Abnormal can do for us. We would send you what we call a read-only kickoff link. It's as easy as grabbing somebody that's got admin, picking their account, reviewing the read-only permissions that we asked for during the POV, and clicking accept. That is the entirety of the user lift to put this into read-only POV mode. And I'll follow up by saying, to go into full production mode, we just send you another link that asks for read-write permissions, so that we can now remediate these messages in real time. At no point during the Abnormal ecosystem implementation is there the concept of a downtime or a maintenance window, or having to update public records that may cause some type of upstream issue. We're strictly that Graph API plug, gives us the ability to be very, very prudent and slow and methodical when it comes to what we then do with our other email security controls, right? Having Abnormal in place with this Graph API plug gives you the ability to really put your hands on the volume knobs anywhere else in the stack that you would like, right? Whether that's slowly turning down things in a gateway, slowly turning things up in the Microsoft world. We don't ever force that kind of big flip the switch moment that we think about when we think about switching email providers, and that's very helpful. Now, this is not a single time in my 2.5 years at Abnormal caused any type of headache for any organization. We've never brought down mail flow or accidentally blocked a message or delayed messages in any way. We're off to the side in read-only mode. This is really helpful to us because it allows us to provide you, for a zero risk and $0, a full risk assessment. I will point out that it only takes 3.5 hours to go through the entire Abnormal risk assessment. This document will be the deliverable from that, talking about the problems, but more specifically, what we've seen in your organization. We do a 45-day retrospective analysis to understand what's still sitting in inboxes, what are end users interacting with, and then we tear apart a couple of these attacks to understand what about this Microsoft or Proofpoint or whomever else is in the chain isn't going to grab this. Why can't they do it? What is Abnormal doing differently? As well as full access to the portal for 30 days for the entire team that is interested in the proof of value. So that's the kind of very quick overview of that. Was there a follow-up question to that, sir?
I don't think so. So I mean, ultimately, I don't need to make MX record changes. I don't need to make any significant uplift in anything. It's more or less a wizard-driven next finish or next finish, right? And as soon as I do that now, I've given Abnormal the ability to retroactively go back and look at emails that have already been sent or sitting in those mailboxes now, and start to do the analysis of what would have happened. And then moving forward for the next 30 days, I'm looking at what happened in real time, what your tool has found, what it would have done had it been in full production mode. And irregardless of whatever security tools you have or how much investment you've made in Office 365 email protection, this is looking at all those things after the fact. So this is the last thing to look for, meaning in a chain of events of things happening. If you have other tools that are doing scans, we're going to look at what it missed and figure out what harm has happened or could be happening in your environment, and the cost to the customer to do this experiment is how much?
This is $0.
So it's 3.5 hours is the cost, right? It's going to take an engineer or a team of people, give or take a handful of meetings, to sit down with us at Comport and Abnormal and figure out, get the tool deployed, make sure it's seeing all the emails, come back a week later, look at what's happening, do a little tutorial of how the tool works. If you do want to spend some time with the tool and understand how those models are working, we'll show you how to do it. And then at the end of the day, we'll give you this executive level report that you can use for, potentially if you don't have budget for this, you can use that to show your executive team, like, hey, this is why we need to amplify our security program, and this is a tool we need to get budget for sooner than later, right?
Absolutely. And I think that, by we, I mean the engineers, we really focus on attacks, where are the gaps. We run this very much like a very expensive risk assessment that you might pay a third party to come in and do, but that goes hand in hand with our business value consultancy within Abnormal, right? We're able to take all of the telemetry, all of the numbers, all of the risks that we've identified on this component, and really kind of push that into a business value proposition that in most cases is going to be all you're going to need to request funding for something like that.
I'll add that, if you're looking to get rid of your current SEG, right? So you're using one of the other competitors, right? This is obviously a great solution, but there's some other features and functionality that people are doing that are not necessarily security related or email security related, right? So things like archiving and journaling, doing backups, looking at your environment holistically. That's something that Comport can do. We can look at what you're doing today, where the gaps are from a holistic point of view, whether it's protecting the data, backing it up, journaling, or from an e-discovery point of view, right? So we can help set those things up, point you in the right direction, or do all that work for you, work with you to make sure that you're getting the value out of the combination of Office 365 and Abnormal.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, with that, we have 2 minutes. Any other last minute things you want to add in here, Joe?
Yeah, I really appreciate everyone's time today. This is a big kind of, at least for me, this was a big seed change in how we look at email security, right? We're not kind of focusing on these half-hearted detections anymore. We're not, rewriting links and we don't know, and delivering messages with attachments and hoping that we understand whether they're bad later. This is all happening in real time. I watch organizations every day move from a very kind of on the back heel security posture to a very front-facing security posture with Abnormal, and it's a great way to see kind of a whole SOC or a whole security organization really kind of rally around a tool like this because they see that intrinsic value during our proof of value.
Awesome. Well, Joe, thanks for joining and participating today, and all the customers on the call. To Eric Crooker's point, this is one piece of the puzzle for our security posture. A fantastic tool. You'll see instant value and time savings. One of those, to Joe's point, one of those tools where once you get comfortable with the tool and you get comfortable with what it does and how it does it, you'll get engineering time back and improve security posture at the same time. And there's all sorts of other functionality that we didn't talk about today that we would love to learn about your organization and deep dive how abnormal security and other security tools can help benefit your organization. So with that, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. This is great. Appreciate it. Thank you, Justin.
Absolutely. Thank you everyone for your time today.